Welcome to episode 33 of the Courageous Coach podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Hague, and this is our final episode for this season. So this is going to be a solo episode, just me, and I like to think of this as, or what I'm hoping for this episode is that it's going to be a reflective closing, not a high energy finale. But I feel like this season has been a slower and deeper exploration of something that is absolutely at the heart of courageous coaching, and that is grounded confidence. This season has really been about coming back to our ground rather than reaching for something new. I suppose I have to come back, or I have to start with grounded confidence. What is it? And can't talk about grounded confidence without leaning into Brené Brown's definition of grounded confidence. And I really love how she talks about grounded confidence as not arrogance or posturing, but a kind of confidence that is built on self-awareness and courage and practice. So it's not about getting it right all of the time. It's not about knowing or having all of the answers. Sometimes it's about learning and unlearning, practicing, allowing failure, and ultimately the kind of quiet joy of mastery. And one of the things that I notice as I develop my own grounded confidence through these conversations and through the work that I do with courageous coaches, and of course my own self-development journey, is I've really noticed a shift in how confidence feels in my body. Whenever I find myself in a space where I am being a courageous coach, I'm stepping into my courage, I'm having conversations with other courageous coaches who are doing their own work and their own courage building, I just noticed for me there's a real flow and a sense of ease and a sense that whilst it might not be perfect, just like this episode might not be perfect, it still feels like I'm in the right place, feeling the right things, and just embracing kind of all of that journey. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the episodes that have really impacted on me in this season. To kind of reflect on some of the things that have come out for me in my own learning, and maybe also offer you some reflective questions as well as we go along. And the episodes in this series were never meant to be standalone episodes. They really were about kind of weaving together. And what happened really naturally is I felt like each episode really built on the one that came before. And that really gave me that sense of really starting to deepen and share my understanding of grounded confidence with my guests and also with you, the audience. But there are things that really kept repeating over all of the conversations I've had this season. And the things that I really noticed were practice over performance, returning rather than pushing, returning to ourselves rather than pushing for more, and staying human in uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. And I think there's always been an element of uncertainty in the work that we do as coaches. So I want to talk first of all about the values episode with Jane Gilham. It was such a beautiful conversation because Jane really kind of models and practices this showing up as who you are, but also where you are. And she shared, really personal insight into the journey that she's been on with grief and how values have played a part in that journey. And the insight for me is that I think values often matter most when we are struggling or we're uncertain. Values steady us and they hold us when life gets difficult, and they can guide us back to who we choose to be. Think about values as anchors, not ideals. Values helping us to choose how we want to move forward. And Susan David talks about walking our why. I love that phrase, walking our why. And as we walk our why, our values are directions, not directives. Values really support us to make courageous choices without certainty. And so I think a really important reflective question for us all is around, what do you return to when things feel difficult? When times are hard, when you're struggling, what do you return to? And I think if we know what our values are and we practice them, not just profess them, so we know what they look like, we know how they feel for us to be in line with our values, then they can really act as that anchor point for us when we struggle. And I had this wonderful conversation with Donna Ward-Higgs, who, has been a podcast guest on every season. And the reason for that, I think, is that I have discovered in Donna a kindred spirit, I guess. And what that brings, I feel, is a flow in our conversation. We kind of bounce off each other. We make each other better. And that's such a glorious thing to have. Of course, it also makes, I think, for a great podcast conversation. So Donna came back for this season 3 to explore emotional agility. And it was a really interesting episode because it wasn't what I expected it to be. It wasn't kind of the ideal episode that I had in my head. I'd not long returned from my emotional agility program with Susan David. And I was still very, very much integrating my own experience of that learning, the whole of that experience. And so my conversation with Donna was really about an exploration of emotional agility, but not in theory, in practical terms, how it had shown up for me in that experience. And, I think emotional agility is ongoing, really deep learning. I absolutely know that you can't just go on a 3-4 day program and I now have this skill of emotional agility. It is way more than that. And what I'm noticing as I kind of continue to think about emotional agility in my own work and in my own life as well, there's a real joy in the learning, but I'm also discovering lots of my edges. And I'm really curious about how joy and those edges are kind of existing together. And of course, I know in my bones that emotional agility is an incredibly important capacity for coaches. And perhaps more importantly, for those of us who want to be more courageous in our practice and also in our business. And in our lives as well. And I think where that work, or the work of emotional agility, has and continues to stretch me is in the concept of hooked that Susan David talks about. When we get hooked by our stories, the things that we tell ourselves, those statements that begin with I am a perfectionist, I am not good at, and ... And it's so easy to get hooked into those stories, and for all of the familiar and difficult emotions that come along with those stories to show up. And there's something for me about really slowing down enough to notice the stories, to notice when I'm hooked, when I'm behaving from a place of habit, and really starting to open up that space between stimulus and response. I mean, I would like to think that even before doing the program with Susan, that the space between stimulus and response, I was already, I think, pretty skilled in opening up that space, that pause. But there's a whole other layer of learning for me around what really can help us and support us in opening up that space. So the work continues to stretch me. And, I'm really keen and excited to share how emotional agility is shaping me as a courageous coach, but also shaping the way that I think about courageous coaching and what I want to bring to the world and other courageous coaches. And I have to mention the mindfulness episode with Emily Young, because again, it was such a beautiful episode. I was so struck by Emily's passion for mindfulness. Really, excited, passionate about the potential of mindfulness for really transforming people and their lives. And, this lovely realization that I had during the episode that, mindfulness doesn't have to be big and formal and, I'm going to set aside an hour every day and I'm going to do some mindfulness practice. Of course, that might be what it looks like for you. But I know for me, that feels overwhelming, and finding an hour where I can just be mindful can be challenging sometimes. So I really loved Emily's idea of building mindfulness into everyday moments, normal everyday moments, boiling the kettle, making a cup of tea. I think she even talked about sitting on the loo. Those natural pauses that just happen in our day, and using those everyday moments to practice mindfulness simply, whether that's, being aware of your feet on the ground or doing some breathing techniques. And I'm really struck by how, when we are able to build these skills in ordinary, everyday moments, that supports us when things feel harder, because that muscle is stronger. The habit stacking that Emily talks about, it's there. And we can lean into it when things get harder or things are difficult for us, rather than suddenly thinking, gosh, I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed or anxious. I better do some mindfulness. The muscle is there. It's been developed in those ordinary everyday moments. So I guess my offer for you is, where could mindfulness be made smaller and more livable for you? What possibilities might that open up for your own mindfulness practice? Because I think when it comes to opening up that space between stimulus and response, mindfulness is an essential skill for that. and really building on values and emotional agility and mindfulness. Of course, there was the episode on embodiment with Glyn. And what I really appreciated about Glyn as a guest is he was really clear with me, both before the episode and during the episode. I am not the expert, right? I'm not I think he may have even said, I'm not an embodiment guru. And I so connect with that kind of just needing to be really clear. I'm not the expert here. But he was so willing to share his own journey and his own curiosity around embodiment. And so willing to kind of say, I don't get it right all the time. And I'm learning new stuff, learning and unlearning all the time, which of course is just the heart of grounded confidence. I think embodiment it's a practice, and I think it's a forever practice. It's not a destination that we get to. I wasn't embodied, I now am embodied, right? It's a continuing forever practice. And embodiment continues to be my work. Sometimes I get it right and I really feel connected to everything that's happening in my head and in my body. And sometimes my brain, my head just isn't listening to my body. And I'm also letting go of that kind of, once I've got this, I'll be able to. I'm like, I'm out there, I'm trying it, I'm stretching. That's enough. And I think here, just linking back to grounded confidence, one of the things that I think is really important is that grounded confidence lives in the body, not just in the head. And our ability to access the wisdom of our bodies is a really joyful and important part of developing that grounded confidence. And then the last episode I want to mention was the episode on mastery with Claire Norman. Claire and I have known each other for many, many years. And I knew before the episode, when I invited her to come along, that she and I shared similar thoughts, views, if you like, around mastery. So this idea that mastery is not a place that we get to, I am now a master. And I think, Claire and I talked about the competencies and, the accreditation of master certified coach or master practitioner or whichever, one it is. And how as a profession that can create this sense that mastery is an endpoint, an end destination that we perhaps might all aspire to. But our conversation was just really about mastery, but without competencies and checklists or achievement, the pressure of achievement, and letting go of the idea that mastery makes us good enough. Like once I've achieved mastery, I'll be good enough, right? We are already good enough. And I think for me, the way that I'm kind of leaning into mastery and thinking about it as a concept for me in my own development journey is that mastery for me is about devotion to my craft. It's about holding the joy of that for me, the joy of unlearning and relearning and getting it wrong and picking myself up and celebrating the successes and feeling that ease. It's about the joy, but it's also about holding the discipline, because I think becoming all you can be as a coach, whatever that looks like for you, requires discipline. It requires commitment. And that isn't always easy. Sometimes maybe I think it would be easier to just stay where I am and that's enough. And sometimes I do that. I kind of go, do you know what? I'm done with all of this self-development and learning more. And I just want to stop and pause. But eventually I come back to it, right? This journey, this path that I'm on, I guess, towards mastery. And I really loved Claire's reframing of this, this idea that it's not about searching for mastery or the journey to mastery, because that still kind of has this element of it's an end point, it's a destination. I think mastery is living and breathing and shifting and reshaping. And that's exciting and sometimes terrifying as well. And I think this reframing really helps me to do two things. It helps me to be self-compassionate. And it helps me to hold my value of excellence in a way that is meaningful to me and not because that's what the checklist says or that's what the competency says. I want to hold excellence in a way that is meaningful to me. So there's been so much in this season, all around grounded confidence, values and emotional agility, mindfulness, embodiment, mastery. And of course, we've also had episodes on curiosity and self-awareness. But what I'm kind of walking away with, I think, is that grounded confidence requires practice. It requires compassion for ourselves and for others. It requires patience. And it requires us to stay connected to ourselves. Grounded confidence isn't something that we claim. It's something that we live. So, by way of a close, I'll offer you a couple of reflective questions, again, which I'm holding and I offer to you. Where am I practicing rather than performing? And what does grounded confidence look like for me right now, in this moment? I am so grateful to everybody who has walked this season with me. I hope it's brought you some sense of support. I hope it's maybe piqued some curiosity for you. I hope that it's encouraged you to be kind to yourself, but to keep learning. This work continues. And I hope you'll continue to walk with me and join me for season 4. And maybe come back to some of our episodes from this season and other seasons as and when they feel helpful or supportive. Thank you so much for being here. Take good care, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Coach podcast. I hope it gave you something to reflect on, something to feel, and maybe even something to act on. If you've been nodding along or feeling that tug of recognition, you're not alone. These conversations are here to remind us that courage isn't about having it all figured out. It's about showing up, doing the inner work, and being willing to be seen, even when it feels uncomfortable. If that sounds like the kind of coaching journey you want to go deeper into, I'd love to invite you to check out the Courageous Coach program. It's designed especially for qualified coaches in the early years of building their independent practice. Those who want to coach with more courage, clarity, and humanity, and grow a business that truly reflects who they are. You'll find all the details over on my website, and I've popped the link in the show notes to make it easy for you. And if we're not already connected, come and find me on LinkedIn. Whether you've got questions about the programme, want to share what's resonated for you in this episode, or you just fancy a chat. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know another coach who might need a little courage boost, pass it on. Courage is contagious, after all. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, stay curious, stay human, and keep choosing courage.